For a lot of artists, they might engage with the world in different ways. So for me this year, my work has always been about time and silence, slowing down. So this year, with everything that's been going around in the world, I even wanted to take it a further step. So this is all about to interpret silence, which is a very abstract concept. How do you paint silence? This whole show is called Pause, which is about that slowing down. And so this one is Pause.
If we can take that as example, how do you let the viewers know that's a pause, that's a silence?
Well, I think that's,
how do you see it?
I think that's up to the viewer. The viewer gets many different things, but I would be hoping that if somebody comes into the gallery, not just at this work, but also at the gallery in general, they will get that sense of quiet in the work. They should be able to absorb that. You're coming in here and all the works are very intense but very quiet. The idea is that the viewer has to stand in front of the pause and look at the work. So that's what I want the viewer to do. And I can't dictate that, of course, but that's the intent. What am I looking at? It doesn't matter that you don't know what you're looking at. Picasso said, somebody asked him, what is it you're doing? I don't understand what you're doing. And he said to them, you hear the birds sing, but do you know what they're singing? But you still listen. So it's a bit like that. I'll give you an example of what it could be. So that could be a lake, it could be forms, but I don't have to tell you that. You know, it shouldn't need to be told. No. They are influenced by different things. This one's called, I think, Silent Lake Falling Sky. So that can be water, it can be clouds. So the title is kind of like an introduction to the work. It leads you in without giving you too much, but it's a kind of poetic, because that's what I get out of being out there. I don't want to, I think the worst thing as a painter, you can just try and put every tree, I just get that sense of silence and looking, and then I try and transfer that. So it's an interesting thing to try and get that sense of quiet, and at the same time a little bit optical, sort of a movement thing, because when you're in the landscape, another thing that happens is that you're sitting there, you move your head that way, and already the landscape's changed because you're moving and it's moving. So it's not static, nothing's static. There's a lot of things come into it, but that comes with years of experience of painting. It all starts in the landscape. I do go out to the landscape, I do a lot of drawing, which is quite figurative drawing. I'm looking at the landscape, but when I go to paint, I don't want to paint what I draw. I want to paint how I feel in the landscape, which is that very quiet time where everything slows down and you have time to just breathe, which is, most of us are all running around all the time. So this is about just kind of making time more flexible, more elastic, and just slowing down and looking at the work. Right. So that's what it's about.
So the ideas you get is from the landscape, from outside, but when you're actually painting, you paint from your mind.
Well, I'm painting my reaction to being in the landscape, rather than, I'm not mimicking the landscape, I'm not depicting it. I'm painting a sense of how I feel, and quite often when I don't quite know, I don't say I'm going to paint a blue sky or a green door, I start painting, and then slowly the work starts to talk to itself, and at some point, even quite often when the works are finished, I suddenly realise that I can see a colour that has been in my memory bank from all those drawings that unconsciously or subconsciously has come into the work. Another language. It's like if I were to learn a language, if I think of Chinese language, to me it's very abstract, because I'm looking at shapes and forms that are recognisable.
That's right.
Yeah, and that's with lots of languages. So it's almost like you're creating your own language with the technical ability you have to do that. I have painted figuratively, I've done drawings.
What do you mean by figurative?
Figuratively is something that you recognise, sort of based on the figure on a tree, so that if you look at a painting and you see, this is a portrait or something. But in a way, it comes from that world, because unless you understand that, you can't do this, because the same concepts come in. You have to understand volume, space, texture, all of those things that you apply to painting something else are still applied to this. But you are working in an unknown world that you're creating, rather than depicting something that already exists.
I see. And I realize, Anna, that on the list you have had very poetic kind of
Yeah,
names.
yeah.
For example, Private Song, Silent Lake, Falling Sky. If we can take an example, how did you come up with the name?
I've always been interested in writing and poetry, always. So I'm always writing lines. I have like a list where I write things down. And sometimes it starts when I'm starting a new body of work. Or it's a reflection of me being out there in the landscape, and then I come back and I write a few lines. And then when the work is finished, it's kind of like a junction. They marry up, you know.
Right.
So that's kind of happens.
What you told me just now is really interesting, and something that I didn't think before I came. Well, you're a painter. You paint, right? You draw, but a lot of the ideas or feelings is about writing, right? Go out and write.
Yeah, and I draw, and drawing is a form of writing when you think about it, you know, really. If we're drawing, you know, we all started, the cavemen drew hands there before you wrote language, you started by creating the code. And believe it or not, all of these words, to actually get into this position, you have to have a certain level of technical ability to do that. How do you then technically and in the canvas, in a square or how do you put that silence in there? You have to use your knowledge and your knowledge of colour, your knowledge of texture to give forms, like the forms can be a place for silence.
Do you mind telling us a bit of the technical part of it?
There's a lot of shifting. So there's a lot of changes, a lot of technical changes. Even what can be seen as clouds and water, that had a lot of technical changes to get that sense of water, and then layering. So, for example, if you look at that painting, you can see the graphite, the grey part in the middle, that actually makes the clouds and the water come forward.
Yeah.
So then how do you then modulate that? Do you put more white or blue? That the whole painting would die. So you need to start working with colour and modulating and creating contrast and creating textural contrast. So they're all the technical things that you have to, they're the devices.
Very subtle. Very subtle.
And that takes a long time to work at. So, for example, if you look at that one, it's got an edge of pink that floats. It makes the paint float. If that were just one flat pink, it would be very concrete, and I didn't want that. I wanted a sense of a floatiness. So that's what happens. And that one there, where the paint is moving, it's not still in one spot. The blue is coming out into this section. So it means that optically there's a sense of quiet, but it's movement rather than one square shape, which then becomes a geometric painting and nothing else. And it's also, the blue is not just one blue, it's many blues and blacks to actually get that kind of sense of the work moving. So there's a lot of that going on in all of them.
Yeah, a lot of colours are very strong and bold.
Yeah, they are. And this time, I wanted the show to hang together really well, but also to have for each work to have its own individuality, to sit in its own space, but to be part of the whole show
as well.
And that's hard.
You say you travel around the world a lot.
I didn't travel that much, but I didn't grow up in Australia, and I've done a few residency overseas and had a studio in the country. So there's been a lot of movement that way, and I've gone into Europe to look at art and things like that.
Which countries did you
find?
find?
In South America and Argentina. I came here when I was 19. There's a lot of kind of internal movement. It's not like I grew up in one culture and just sat. And I've also migrated with parents, which were different nationalities. So there's a lot of that sort of movement, and that not just coming strictly from one tradition, but sort of,
I see.
Yeah.
So the movement is not just about landscape, and it's also your internal feeling, your cultural background.
I think it's my internal reaction to what it's like to find a place to be and sort of gently kind of, but it's also about a reaction to our world today where everything moves, everything's fast. Social media is fast. Everything's 1 second, 4 seconds, 3 seconds. Everything's fast. So this is about just walking in and just slowing right down and looking at the work. That's why it's pause. It's a pause. It's kind of like bending time. You know, time's elastic. You're going to work, you can go 9 o'clock, I've got to be work, 12 o'clock's lunch. If you're out painting in the landscape, all of that disappears. It's like you're in a bubble of time. You know, you're just there on your own painting. There's no external. There might be the movement of leaves, the sun might change, but it's not a constricted time. So that's kind of interesting.
现代艺术里看似随意的几笔，我们常觉得这我也能画，但真正下笔时才发现，无论是构图还是着色都不是那么容易。这一点与书法完全相同，笔法的起承转合，墨色的干湿浓淡都需要长期的训练。苏轼的枯木怪石图看似寥寥几笔，却成为文人画的经典之作。由此可见，中西艺术有很多地方是相通的。安娜用非常简单的语言描述着自己的作品让我这样对现代艺术接触不多的人也觉得原来现代画离我们并不遥远。能做到这一点是因为他平时有写作的习惯。他说自己创作时会先写几行诗，把心里的感受记录下来。对他来说，写作与绘画是一体的，是生活的两个面向。悉尼有很多现代艺术馆和画廊，在这里你可以与艺术家进行面对面的对话，了解他们的创作习惯与思考方式。这些交流同样反哺了我书法的练习，让我更清楚地意识到写作、阅读对于艺术创作至关重要。今天你看书写字了吗？